So hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of a Lucid Life podcast. I, of course, am Patrick Arthur, and I'm joined by a very, very special guest who needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it because I'm afraid she'll hurt me. She goes by a nickname that I've coined, the Lucid Killaaa, but I kind of feel like, if I'm being honest, we might need to change that to the Lucid Butterfly Killaaa. I'm not sure why I get that vibe, but this is Lana Sackwild. So hello, Lana.
Hey, thank you. Awesome intro. Loving the nicknames.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm very excited to have you and very excited to have you on the podcast and to talk to you because I know of all the people that I've met, and there isn't very many of them, honestly, that are lucid dreamers in my life. You're one of the ones that I know has seemingly a lot of similar life experience along with the component of lucid dreaming. And the fact that you're a scientific researcher on top of that also, I think adds another layer to the thing that I think kind of demystifies what lucid dreaming is and makes it, to me, much more interesting. So that's why I wanted to have you on, to pick your brain for all the different life experiences and, you know, what you know about this thing and everything. So my first question for you would be, how did you get your start? Like, how did you find out about lucid dreaming and what kind of led you down this path?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. And I love to do this kind of thing, especially with someone who actually, like yourself, has the experience in it. I've been on a lot of podcasts in the past where I've been talking to people who don't necessarily fully comprehend the topic, and that makes it very difficult to dive deeper into discussion. So I'm super excited. Yeah, I got into it as a child. I'm one of those, I guess, lucky people that have seemingly always been able to do it. Although I first started when I was about 4 or 5 years old through nightmare work. So as a kid I had a lot of really bad nightmares, and my kind of typical routine was like, you know, go to school, come home, do homework, watch cartoons, go to bed, have nightmares. And I think just like one night I had this thought about how if I have a nightmare tonight and I manage to change everything to be cartoon-like, then it won't be as scary. And then I remember my first lucid dream being exactly that, like being in this forest with all these kind of like Disney villain-esque type monsters. And getting this thought of like, all right, if I'm able to change everything into cartoon, it won't be scary.
Right.
And I recalled like the kind of kids cartoon TV show that I watched was called CITV. And it had this big yellow button as the logo. So I kind of like thought about that and then saw that appear in the dream and like smacked the button and everything suddenly like morphed into cartoon. And I thought that was so funny, and I could change the size and the shape and make these like big scary monsters like these tiny little people cartoon people. And that's kind of how it all began, really.
So you used it as a tool to overcome some of your childhood trauma, like the things that you were experiencing that scared you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, at that time, I obviously wasn't like, I didn't know what lucid dreaming was. I didn't know that I was experiencing trauma. But it was, I guess, my kid brain of being like, having no boundaries in that aspect of like, oh, you can't do that in a dream, or that kind of stuff that I feel like stops a lot of adults getting into lucid dream work now.
Like nobody told you that you couldn't do it, so you didn't have that kind of constrained framework of mind. So that makes sense. And it's interesting that you say that, and that's how your life experience with it started. Because the people that I know that are naturals like you, like that they started at young ages or figured it out at a very young age, I don't want to say that it's like exclusively this, but it seems like that there's a reoccurring theme of they discovered it because of something in their life happened that they were afraid of. That was like for one example, I want to jump into your your butterfly story, which I thought was fucking awesome and phenomenal.
Yeah.
For those that aren't, for those that are listening to this in the future, and for those that are watching this in the future, Lana just shared her second episode of Get Lucid with Lana, where she talked about using fear as a tool for getting yourself to your goals and everything, which I think is a very strong proponent of something that we as humans should be doing. Because I feel like I know some people that when they get into this state of fear, they don't know how to like turn the switch and use it as like a motivator and use it. Like for me, a lot of times what will happen is if I'm afraid of something, there'll be like this moment that happens where all of a sudden I get angry at the fact that I'm afraid of it and allowing it to kind of manipulate my thoughts and my feelings and everything. And I'll use that anger to kind of push me through the fear. So like you had said, showing up even when you don't want to.
Yeah.
So for those that haven't seen or listened to her second episode yet, you talked about butterflies. So do you want to just quickly go into your butterfly story real quick, and then I'll kind of touch on it?
Yeah. So yeah, as you were saying, I was talking about the moments that we use fear to excel in something. And for me, one of the fears that was following me around for the longest time was a huge phobia of butterflies. And this started up because my dad took me to a butterfly house when I was a really little kid in a floral jacket. And so I walked into this butterfly house and was absolutely swarmed by hundreds of butterflies that were like bigger than my head and just like flapping around and touching me. And I can still really like remember that moment. It was so traumatic. And it was a really annoying phobia because pretty much everyone I know is like, oh, butterflies are so pretty and they're such beautiful creatures, and they're on like birthday cards and like gifted to people, and they're all these psychedelic colors and patterns. And to me, they're just like these disgusting little furry creatures with the long tongues that like.
To you, it's all like, fuck that shit.
Yeah. And at that like really physical level as well, where I get myself in these frustrating situations where I'd be at a party or an outdoor gathering and be trying to talk with someone, connect to someone, and then there would be this butterfly like looming and I knew that I was just gonna have this freak out and I'd have to like run or scream, and it was just becoming really embarrassing and just like not a good situation to have following me forever.
And so how old were you at that point when you decided to utilize what you knew about lucid dreaming to get over that? How old were you then?
This was just like very recently, like within the last couple of years. It really took me like up until super recently. I think it was in my first year of my master's, so maybe like 2016 or 2017.
Okay.
Not super long ago.
So it was like last week. Okay, gotcha. Just checking. Just making sure. All right. You did it on the way over here. Okay, I got it. Totally get it. Yeah.
Just last night.
Well, I think that's awesome that you were able to kind of figure that out regardless of when it happened. Because I feel like that, for me, you've heard some of my like talking about the addiction and everything, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into lucid dreaming personally, was because of an addiction to meth. But not just an addiction to meth. I have a very addictive personality in general. If I enjoy something, I want more of it and a lot more of it. Like that's kind of just who I am as a person. And so I use that as a sort of means. One of the reasons that I got into it was, I don't think I've said this to other people outside of like a select few people, but part of the reason why I use meth as frequently as I did, apart from like the shit that happened in my life, was I didn't like the fact at that time that that every night there would be like an 8-hour period where I just didn't fucking remember what I was doing. And there'd be like 6-8 hours where I would have to go to sleep and not remember what the fuck I did. It'd be like it felt like I was wasting parts of my life and not being able to remember any of it. So when I got into lucid dreaming, there was that aspect of it, of learning to do that so that I could remember what I was doing for those periods of time during my nights. So that way I could go on these adventures and do all the sorts of things and fucking have these superpowers,
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I also wanted to do it was because of the fact I hated having those relapse dreams. They were like, in and of themselves, they were their own traumas. And so,
Yeah.
for those that don't know, very much like you did, you can use lucid dreaming to get over. Like, honestly, I should be what you did. I thought it was so funny that you had like that phobia, because I don't have that phobia, but I have the same sort of visceral reaction when it comes to spiders. And I've
Yeah.
often thought about using lucid dreaming with spiders, like to get over that kind of reservation of like, oh, you fucking die. You know what I mean? You know?
Yeah. I
And
actually did that recently. I don't know if you saw it in the group that I was posting a dream about. I had all these spiders all over me. This wasn't a lucid dream,
oh,
but it was just this disgusting like dream. I had these spiders all over me, and the concept of the dream was I was in this kind of group of people, and they were saying that we had to just do this like funky dance to like just shake them off. So it was like me and a bunch of people in this room doing these like shaking dance to get these spiders off. But it was this like terrifying thing. But then that kind of like got in my head of like, oh, you know, when you interact with a spider, or if there's a spider on you, it doesn't have to be so scary, because we were laughing so much about doing this like shaking dance in the dream.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I could incorporate some of that into my actual life, I feel like I'd be much better off, because it's the same sort of thing. Like for me in spiders, it's like if I see them ahead of time, like if I know that they're there, I won't get scared. Like I can deal with them. I don't like to kill them if I don't have to, because I realize that
Yeah.
they play a very important part to, keeping the insect population down. And, they're more friend than they are foe. At least they should be. But don't tell that to my monkey self. My monkey self is like, just fucking kill them and shit. But if they get the jump on me, I will fucking squeal. I will toss shit over. I will run. Like there's no bravery when it comes to me being surprised by spiders. So I've been thinking about doing that for a long time, of trying to incorporate them into a lucid dream to just get over that.
Yeah.
And
I
the fact
highly
that you got this
recommend
butterfly,
it.
I thought was fucking badass, because I've met other people when I was first coming up, before I met any of you guys. And to those that are wondering, what group chat? I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate to be amongst other lucid dreamers now, a kind of content creation group, and we all are doing our own separate thing, but we're all helping each other kind of build each other up also. So we have a group chat that if you miss 2 hours of it, all of a sudden there's 600 messages that you don't see and have to go through, but it's awesome. But there was this one girl that I knew way before all of this, who had this very, I don't want to say irrational, because it's like, it's a scary thing when you think about it, but it was irrational at the time, because I don't think she ever had anything happen. There was this girl I used to work with who had this fear of somebody coming up behind her and like either strangling her or like doing something gnarly, like slitting her throat or some shit.
Yeah.
And she had like recurring nightmares of this over and over and over again.
Oh,
And when I
man.
told her about lucid dreaming, like I was like, have you ever like heard of lucid dreaming or tried to do that? And I explained to her what it was. She's like, oh no, I'll have to try that. Like not even a week later, she has a lucid dream, and then she's able to fucking, hang on, I'm gonna mute that. She's able to, basically she had a lucid dream where that situation happened and she was able to conquer it. And then she
Yeah.
never had another nightmare, another recurring nightmare ever since then. So the
Yeah.
potential of being able to overcome your fears and your phobias and, get over your own shit, I think is so powerful. And it's one of the things that I think is so essential to our species and our evolution, is being able to dive into lucid dreaming for that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got such like instant repair mechanisms. It's crazy. And it's like one of those things that a lot of the time, same for me, like with my research and working with people who have been using it for depression, anxiety, mental health issues. A lot of the participants in the study, they don't even necessarily have to truly understand like where that trauma is entirely stemming from, or if they're having recurring nightmares and stuff like that. It's exactly like you said with your friend. It's just that concept of being like, okay, the next time this happens, I'm going to get lucid and just be like, no, this isn't happening anymore. And then, yeah, so many of them found it just never again. Literally just from that like conscious awareness kicking in and being like, no, I've had enough of this. I'm good without it now.
Yeah.
Stop. And then it just stops.
So you found it, or it found you at like 4 years old. And so how did it take off from there? Was it like you just had an innate awareness of the fact that, oh, I can do this now, and so I'm fucking just going to do this all the time? Or did it happen like every now and again and it was very sparse, or what?
I mean, I've always been interested in dreams for sure. Like I have dream journals from that age as well. So I was definitely paying attention to dreams. And I think I just thought the same as now, like it's just the coolest fucking thing. Like you get to have your own little movie essentially. And then if you can be conscious during that and do cool shit in it, like why not? And so I, like as a kid, I started using it just for stuff that I would be doing, like dance rehearsal or riding a bike or practicing for a test, or like all of these kind of kid things that were in my life. And then it was only when I kind of got to high school, like beginning of high school level, where I'd been following my dream stuff for so long, and I was that kid that always tells people like, oh, you showed up in my dream and we were doing this. And then I started realizing when I was talking with people about dreams that mine were super weird. And I was using them for problems throughout my life, both problems and just my own kind of virtual playground. I'm still like baffled to this day, as I'm sure you are as well, of like why people are not interested in this stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things, man, where it really is a mind fuck, you know, because once it's one of those things, and I said this on my last episode with my last guest, that it's kind of hard to explain to somebody who's never actually done it, who's never actually been there, who's never actually experienced the intense clarity that happens once you become lucid. Like all of a sudden everything just becomes 100 times more vivid and more quote unquote real than real, you know. And the sense of awe that I feel every time that it happens, where I'm just like, oh, I'm fucking back here. Okay, this is okay. What do I want to do now? And then the fact that you can literally do whatever you want to do and have it happen, you know, is one of the I've been wrestling this idea for a while, and the notion that you were saying, like, you probably wonder why people don't want to do it. I think it's because we have this weird ingrained thing in our brains that says that it's not real. And so because we think it's not real, or we perceive that it's not real, that it makes it for some reason less important or less worthwhile to actually explore or put in the time and the energy into, you know, which, you know, to be perfectly honest, there was a time in my life where I was sort of on that mindset also, where, you know, because I can remember specific dreams when I was a kid that were like borderline nightmare, that involved like a killer whale, like me being in some kind of pool or something, and this killer whale was like trying. And for the record, like killer whales are probably my second favorite animal on the planet, animal being whatever, after dogs, after Fidel specifically. Killer whales would be the next one on the list for me. And so I had this recurring nightmare as a kid of like this killer whale trying to attack me and everything, and being like swimming towards like the land, and there was this fucking like this half goat, half man with like an axe on the shore waiting for me. And so I couldn't get out of the water, and I couldn't like leave the water either.
Yeah.
That thing over and over again. But there was some part of me that was like, well, it's not real, so it doesn't matter. Like, you know, as a young kid, I was like, well, thank God that shit's not real. You know what I mean? But
yeah, for sure.
When you go and you have these nightmarish experiences, it has like a visceral and real effect on your body, which I'm probably, since with you do so much on the actual studies of it, you probably have seen a lot of this, that when people have nightmares, there's like a physical reaction to their body, like their heartbeat starts going 1,000 miles an hour, they start actually sweating, they can, you know, the things they're experiencing have a real reaction to the body. So it's like, why is that any less real than anything else than the things that they would experience in waking life?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because yeah, talking about it not being real and talking to people about how, you know, maybe we're using lucid dreams as an escape, like an escape from reality, or even regular dreams as an
Yeah.
escape or whatever. But it's like you can say that about anything, you know?
Yeah,
And I
for
think
sure.
things are real if you decide you want them to be real. Like if you want the work you do in a lucid dream to bring it back to your waking life and integrate it into your knowledge and how you live your life and decisions that you make, then how is that any less real than what you do when you're awake and you make a decision?
Totally. Yeah, you were talking about how you used it for like practicing tests and everything like that. I've used lucid dreaming for practicing auditions, practicing
Yeah.
improv scenes. For anyone that doesn't know or hasn't had the exposure, lucid dreaming is literally like, if you want it to be this, you can make it this, in that it's your ultimate practice facility. So
Mm-hmm.
anything like you've read, I guarantee you have, but Stephen LaBerge's book, Exploring the
Yeah.
World of Lucid Dreaming. So I can remember, I can remember one of the earlier chapters, him talking about this, and that there was like some guy who, I want to say he was like in a symphony or something, or he was a member of a symphony, and he had like some really big performance on a big stage that he'd never been on before, and he was like, well, fuck, I gotta fucking practice this shit, otherwise I'm gonna just be a ball of nerves for the whole thing. And so he practices this intense orchestra performance in like the facility that he would have actually been in a lucid dream, and he just fucking nailed it. And then when he went into the actual thing, it was like a breeze for him. So
Yeah.
you can have like real world applications applied in the lucid dream state, and it will actually carry over into your performances in the physical world. But
Mm-hmm.
why isn't that real, you know, like just going back to
Yeah.
what you were saying.
It gets you real results. I used to the same practicing thing. I moved to Japan, and I lived there for 5 years. And the first 2 years I went to school there, and I was the only white kid in my class. Most of my class was Chinese, and we were doing class in Japanese. So we would have Japanese classes, language classes, and have to remember all the Chinese characters, the kanji. And I used the dream space for that every night, like rehearsing and rewriting kanji, and then I'd go into tests, and I would always be top of the class, and there's just like, you know, 30 other Chinese kids just like, what the fuck is this white kid doing? Like, why is she so good at Japanese kanji?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's dope. Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay, so I got a question, since we're going into that. Since so is your last name Sackwild, or is it Sack and then you just added Wild because you were wilder?
It is Sackwild. It's just built into my name.
Damn, man. That's
Yeah.
like, okay, that's like the, for people that don't know, Wild is a form of lucid dreaming that essentially is like, I mean, really, when I think about it, it's like the holy grail. Like, it's the thing that I aspire to fucking want to get to, like that level of,
Mm.
essentially, it's being able to do it every day. If you wanted to do it every day, you can do it every day, and you could do it essentially at will, like when you want to. So it's called wake induced lucid dreaming. And basically, I'm talking to Lana Sack wake induced lucid dreaming right now. It's pretty fucking cool. Yeah, that almost feels like when you go back into your life and you look at everything that you've been through and all your experiences and everything that you've learned from and you gained from, do you feel like it was almost sort of like the universe was putting this on you, like all these things, like this is a gift that I want you to have because I feel like you're one of the ones that would know what to do with it or how to utilize it properly?
Like a being born to do it kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, like I have a similar drug use, like addictive personality. Like you were saying, I've been addicted to drugs, and I used them heavily throughout my teenage years. And you know,
High
the
five.
drugs that I used, the drugs that I used most were like ketamine, MDMA, marijuana. All of those drugs are now being researched for work with depression and
Yeah.
trauma. And then you know, I had my dream space as well, which I used to help me out. And it seems like this, like, yeah, run up to doing stuff, it's weird. And then, you know, I did my master's on using lucid dreaming for mitigating depression and working with anxiety and talking with a lot of people who went through addiction and those kind of things. So it does feel weird. It's strange how a lot of my experiences up until now are kind of all suddenly tying in together.
Almost like a synchronicity of sorts.
Yeah. Do you feel like that?
Yeah. I've kind of felt like the same thing, and it's a strange sensation because before I really knew what lucid dreaming was, and before I really understood how important of a thing it could be to somebody if they utilize it properly, I was such a shitty person, man. Like I look at myself like past iterations of Patrick as just being a garbage human. And having lucid dreaming be one of those things that was so critical to my evolution, because it put me more in touch with my fears. It put me more in touch with like my phobias. It put me more in touch with my bullshit.
Yeah.
It just put me more in touch with myself in like a direct, very deep way. Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of awesome thing about dream work as well, is like dreams are going to show you what you need to see, not necessarily what you want to see.
Totally.
Right? So even when we get lucid and we have a task and maybe our ego comes in the waking state, we have an idea of how it's going to go down, but it doesn't necessarily go down like that. Yeah.
So, okay, since we're on that topic, that kind of segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk about. You've read, I saw in your episode, you had you had Robert's book in your background, Wagner's book.
Yeah.
So have you encountered the voice behind the dream before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, can you tell me about some of your experiences with it? Like, do you remember the first experience that you had with it?
Oh, good question. I don't know that I would know the first time, but I think it's one of those things that has always made a regular appearance. And it's real interesting because I've found that a lot of my more recent lucid dreams, this voice makes an appearance even if I'm aiming to talk with dream characters. So for example, recently I've been doing a lot of dream work with connecting to people who are deceased in my lucid dreams, and I'll get lucid and then I will be trying to find the person who's passed, and often I'll try and talk to a character to locate them or ask a character, I don't know, something to do with them, or if I can create like a visitation dream or that type of thing. And sometimes when I'm talking to these characters that are not super conscious, the voice will just come out of nowhere and reply back. So it's almost like I'm in like the set of a play, and there's just a bunch of puppet characters, and it doesn't matter who I talk to. It's like the dream or the voice behind the dream is interacting with me.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I love that you said almost like a play, like it's a stage or something. Because I've had this idea, like, okay, when you were a kid, did you ever do projects that involved like a diaphragm? So like how would I explain it? I don't know if I'm using the right word, but like I had to do a project on a place in California called San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
It's like in Northern California. It's a very like beachy place where there's like a lot of elephant seals and sea lions and everything. It's, it's like a kind of beachy town. So I had to do this project on San Luis Obispo. And so I got like a shoebox that I then like painted and colored and put like a blue sky and like clouds and everything. And then put in like the thing, I had like different animals and stuff in the shoebox, right? A lot of times what I'll do is I'll look up at the sky, because one of my favorite things to do, Like whenever I've had conversations with that voice behind the dream, whatever it is, I'm usually looking up at the sky when I'm doing it, you know?
Oh, cool.
And when I look up at the sky, sometimes when I'm physically awake and I have that moment, for some reason I'll get like this sensation of being in a shoebox. So like that shoebox in the diaphragm for the project. So going back to what you said about it being like a play or a stage and everything, I get that same sort of sensation of like, what if I'm just the thing in the shoebox?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's trippy.
It's very.
That's interesting you said that, 'cause my most recent probably interaction with the voice is with looking at the sky as well, and having this like really epic kind of like Lion King scene of all the clouds like, you know, coming, you know, when Simba's like speaking to Mufasa and all the clouds are like whirling.
Where are you? You were saying?
Love it. It was exactly like that. So yeah, it's like, you know, everything was swirling around and then this voice was coming to me from the clouds, and it makes it all the more just epic, you know, and that's why it feels so profound, and you're having this conversation with the dream, the universe, your subconscious, like God, whatever you want to call it. And again, I think that ties into like, oh, well, that's not real, or that's your mind or whatever. But I don't know. I'm like, if I'm receiving information or even just hearing, sometimes it's that thing of like hearing something being said to you, like, you know, something, but it's not until your friend says it to you or whatever that it really sinks in. I feel that same way about the voice behind the dream.
Like that it's a friend of yours?
Yeah, like a deep knowing part of myself that sometimes it needs to come from outside of myself for me to be able to like really hear it and take it in.
Yeah, my whole thing about because there's a couple of different schools of thought as to what lucid dreaming could be, and depending on what your belief system is, what if you're a religious person or not, if you're atheist, agnostic, whatever your perspective on the universe and everything is, it kind of can shape how you look at this one specific field, right? So there's the school of thought which I've been on this side of the schoolyard at one point before too, where I'm like, dreaming only takes place in your brain. Lucid dreaming is just you being conscious of you being in your brain. And then there's the school of thought that, and this is more or less where I'm now kind of leaning more towards, is that like sometimes it feels like, okay, so hold on. So there was that school of thought where it's only in your brain. Then there's a school of thought where you're like projecting out somewhere, like your consciousness is going somewhere else.
Right.
And that kind of like, I don't know. My words are really escaping me right now, but it kind of like borderlines and has some sort of blending features to what people perceive as astral projection. And my personal belief at this point is that I think that those two are more in alignment than not. Like I think wake-induced lucid dreaming specifically and astral projecting, I think, in my opinion, I think they're the same thing, but I have one instance that makes me question that. So I'm not like a firm believer in it, but I'm also like, I kind of think it is, but there's one thing that happened where I'm like, I don't know if it is because of this one thing.
What happened?
Okay, so I'll get to that. So, but going back to the school of thought of, okay, so if it is just taking place in your own mind, right? And people just saying like, oh, it's just your mind. Okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I can't prove that it is, and I can't prove that it's not, right? But the fact that I'm able to do it at all, the fact that I'm able to, if it is inside my mind, the fact that I'm consciously able to dive inside my own fucking mind and do all these things, why is that any less amazing, and why is that not being talked about more often, you know? You know what I'm saying? So like, even if that voice behind the dream is just your own subconscious or what the fuck ever. What? You talk to your subconscious and it replies back to you? Like, how does that not fucking like get talked about more? Yeah, exactly. Mind fucking blown.
Yeah.
Like, even if that's the simplest way of explaining what is going on. And I love what in our group chat, when I asked this like a week back or so, I was like, what do you guys think the difference is between wild and AP? And Reese was all like, I honestly don't know, but I feel like we're oversimplifying it no matter what is happening. I think it's way too complicated of a thing to really put words into, you know?
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like, even if it is the simplest thing of saying is it's just in your mind or our consciousness is projecting out there, I think there's so much more to what consciousness is and where it can go and what it can do, that it's like it's fucking impossible for something as stupid as a monkey, which is what I am, to be able to actually put it in the detail that is necessary and to do it justice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. And I think it's super cool that people want to research these states of consciousness, and they want to make distinctions, and they want to be able to say, like, you know, this is the difference between an OBE or an AP or a lucid dream or whatever they want to do. I think that's great. But I think the whole being so caught up in it and like really trying to define it, and you didn't have a lucid dream, you just had an OB, or like vice versa, and the kind of backlash that seems to come through and like separate people. Yeah, I'm just like, fuck it, dude. Like, it's so fucking cool anyway. So.
Who cares? It's fucking cool, man. I did it, you know?
Yeah. So what was your experience?
Yeah. And it really is just all about the experience that you're having. It doesn't matter what label you want to put on it. The fact is that you went and did a thing and you experienced it. So no matter what title you want to give it, it's still just, all it boils down to at the end of the day is it's an experience that you had, you know?
Yeah. So what was the one that tripped you up?
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of A Lucid Life Podcast, episode 3, with my special guest, Lana Sackwild, a.k.a. the Lucid Killaaa, a.k.a. Get Lucid with Lana. I know I left that a kind of a cliffhanger right there and not telling that story, but I promise that the next episode is going to get into that story right away. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to No Spoilers Gamer. Keep listening to A Lucid Life Podcast on Spotify and Apple. And check out Get Lucid with Lana on Facebook and at Lana Sackwild on Instagram. See you next time.